Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. Wonderful to have you here today. We're truly grateful for your continued support. Tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? Big city? Small town? We'd love to know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Hidden Truths. Frank Dawson stared at the cell phone screen, reading his daughter's text message for the fifth time. Katie had sent it 2 hours ago from her dorm at Westlake University. Dad, can we talk? It's about Mom. Important. He'd tried calling back immediately, but she hadn't answered. Now, as he sat in the darkness of his suburban Virginia home, the worry gnawed at him. Frank wasn't supposed to be here. His Marine Special Forces unit had been deployed in Syria, but an injury to his shoulder during a mission had earned him an early trip home. Nobody knew he was back, not even his wife Marla. After 20 years of marriage and 15 years of military service, Frank thought he knew who his wife was. The subtle changes in her behavior during their video calls over the past 6 months had been easy to dismiss from thousands of miles away. The new highlights in her auburn hair, the unfamiliar jewelry, the way her eyes drifted during their conversations. The house phone rang, shattering the silence. Frank checked the caller ID. Katie. Hey, sweetheart, he answered, keeping his voice low. Dad. Katie's voice trembled. Are you still overseas? No, I'm home. Got back this afternoon. What's going on? A sharp intake of breath. You need to leave. Now. What? What? I overheard Mom on the phone with Roger. She was crying now. He said if I ever told you about them, he'd kill me. Dad, he meant it. I've seen him at the house when you're gone. He's not right. Frank's mind shifted to the cold, analytical state that had kept him alive through 3 tours. Who's Roger? Mom's boyfriend. He's got a record, assault charges. I looked him up. He's been staying over whenever you deploy. I thought you should know, but when I confronted Mom, Roger grabbed the phone and, where are you now? Still at school? I'm scared to come home. Listen carefully. Stay there. Don't tell your mother we spoke. I'll handle this. Frank ended the call and moved silently through the darkened house to his office. The wall safe behind the family portrait contained his service pistol, a Sig Sauer P226 he kept locked away when home. As he loaded it, he heard the garage door opening. Marla was home early. The clock on his desk read 8:17 p.m. She usually worked until 9 at the insurance office. Frank slipped the weapon into the back of his waistband and moved to the kitchen, sitting in darkness at the counter. Through the window, he watched as his wife stepped from her silver Audi. She wasn't alone. The man who accompanied her was tall with a muscular build visible beneath his expensive leather jacket. His close-cropped hair and swagger reminded Frank of the contractors he'd encountered overseas, men who played at being soldiers without the discipline or honor. Roger had his arm around Marla's waist, his hand resting possessively on her hip. Frank remained motionless as they approached the door, laughing about something. He heard the key in the lock, followed by whispers and the distinctive sound of kissing. I can't believe he bought that story about Katie needing emergency money, Marla giggled. 3 more months of deployment, and we're free. The idiot doesn't suspect a thing. You sure the brat won't talk? Roger's voice was gravelly. She won't. I told her you were just joking about hurting her. Besides, she's terrified of you. Good. Because I meant it. Nobody's going to mess this up. The door swung open. Marla flipped on the lights and froze, her face draining of color as she spotted Frank. Surprise, Frank said softly. Roger recovered first, reaching under his jacket. Well, look what we have here. The hero returns. The glint of metal confirmed Frank's suspicion. Roger was armed. 15 years of Special Forces training kicked in as Roger pulled a handgun. Surprise, old man. Roger sneered, raising the weapon. Frank moved with practiced efficiency. 3 rapid steps forward, his left hand deflecting Roger's arm upward as the gun discharged into the ceiling. His right elbow connected with Roger's throat, followed by a devastating knee strike to the groin. As Roger doubled over, Frank twisted the gun from his grasp and brought the butt down hard against his temple. Roger crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Marla screamed, backing against the wall. Frank, I can explain. Save it. Frank's voice was cold as he zip-tied Roger's wrists behind his back using restraints from his go bag. You two have been threatening my daughter. It's not what you think. I heard everything. So did my body camera. Frank tapped the small device on his chest, a habit from deployment he hadn't broken since arriving home. Call 911, Marla. Tell them there's an armed intruder in our home who threatened a service member's family. That puts this under federal jurisdiction. Please, Frank, do it now, or I'll add accomplice to attempted murder to your charges. As Marla shakily made the call, Frank checked Roger's wallet. Roger Reynolds, 42. The ID was fake, but good quality. Frank photographed it, then sent the image to his unit buddy, Tommy Blackwood, now working at the FBI. Within 30 minutes, sirens announced the arrival of police. By then, Frank had secured the scene and retrieved Roger's weapon, a Glock with the serial number filed off. 2 officers entered with weapons drawn, followed by a plainclothes detective. Master Sergeant Dawson? The detective extended his hand. Detective Philip Russo. We got a call about an armed intruder. That's him, Frank said, pointing to Roger. He pulled a gun on me when I confronted him about threatening my daughter. As paramedics loaded the still unconscious Roger into an ambulance, Frank's phone buzzed. A text from Tommy, ID fake. Real name Roger Treadwell. Multiple outstanding warrants. Known associate of the Montega cartel. Stay put. Feds coming. Frank showed the message to Detective Russo, whose eyebrows shot up. This just got interesting, Russo muttered. Mrs. Dawson, you'd better come with us for questioning. As they led Marlo away, she looked back at Frank, her expression a mixture of fear and hatred. This isn't over. Frank watched impassively. You're right about that. Chapter 2, Blood Ties. 3 days after the confrontation, Frank sat across from FBI Special Agent Tommy Blackwood in a small conference room at Quantico. The walls were bare except for a map of Virginia and surveillance photos of Roger Treadwell, with various known criminals. You got lucky, Red, Tommy said, using Frank's old unit nickname. Treadwell is no joke. He's enforcer-level talent for the Montega cartel. 5 confirmed kills that we know of. Frank sipped his coffee. What was he doing with my wife? That's the million-dollar question. Tommy slid a folder across the table. Marla's been visiting Treadwell in county lockup. Claims they're in love, but we think there's more. Her financials show unusual deposits. $50,000 over 6 months. Too small for cartel money laundering. Too large for a legitimate side hustle. What about Katie? Is she safe? We've got her in protective custody at a safe house in Maryland. She's scared but cooperating. According to her statement, she overheard Treadwell and your wife discussing plans that went beyond an affair. Frank leaned forward. What plans? Katie couldn't hear everything, but she caught phrases like insurance payout and service records. Our working theory is they were planning to access your military benefits, possibly your pension. She'd need me dead for that. Tommy nodded grimly. Exactly. And with your combat deployment, a battlefield death wouldn't raise many flags. Frank felt cold fury building in his chest. What's the play here? Officially, we build a case for conspiracy and attempted murder. Treadwell's not talking, but his phone records show calls to known hitmen in the weeks before your early return. And unofficially, Tommy glanced at the door before responding. We think Treadwell was working an angle that his cartel bosses don't know about. Your wife might have been a side project. If that's true, the cartel might solve our problem for us. I want to speak to Marla. Bad idea, Rhett. Let us handle. She's the mother of my child and was planning my murder. I need to look her in the eyes. Tommy sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you. The county detention center visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Marla entered wearing an orange jumpsuit, her usual immaculate appearance disheveled. She sat across from Frank, separated by plexiglass. You've ruined everything, she hissed, picking up the phone. That's an interesting way to greet the husband you were planning to kill, Frank replied calmly. It wasn't like that. Then explain it to me, Marla. 15 years of marriage, and you bring a cartel killer into our home? Threaten our daughter? Marla's facade cracked slightly. Katie was never supposed to be involved. Roger lost his temper. Roger Treadwell. 5 confirmed murders. That's who you chose over your family. You were never there, Frank. 15 years of deployments, never knowing if you'd come home in a box. Do you know what that does to a person? I built a life without you because I had to. And my death benefit? Was that part of building your life too? Marla's eyes hardened. You don't understand what you've stumbled into. This is bigger than us. Roger has connections. Powerful people who won't let this stand. Is that a threat? It's a warning. For Katie's sake, drop the charges. Say it was all a misunderstanding. Frank stood. When Roger wakes up in the hospital, tell him something from me. Threatening a service member's family is federal jurisdiction. You picked the wrong Marine to betray. As Frank walked away, Marla called after him. They're coming for you, Frank. You can't protect her forever. Tommy was waiting outside. Got all that on tape. She basically confirmed the conspiracy. She's scared, Frank said. Not of jail, of whoever else is involved. We'll put a detail on your house. Frank shook his head. No need. I'm not going home. Time to go hunting. Chapter 3. Serpent's Web. Katie Dawson sat across from her father in the small safe-house living room, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. At 20, she had her mother's slender build but Frank's intense gray eyes and stubborn jaw. 3 days in protective custody had left her with dark circles under her eyes. I should have told you sooner, she said. When Mom first brought him around 6 months ago, Frank placed his hand over hers. This isn't on you, Katie. Tell me everything you remember, even details that might seem unimportant. Katie took a deep breath. It started during your last deployment. Mom said she met Roger at a charity event, something for veterans. He was charming at first, brought her flowers, took her to nice restaurants. When did you realize something was wrong? About 2 months in. I came home for spring break and heard them arguing about money. Roger wanted Mom to change something in your will or insurance. When I confronted her, she claimed it was about making sure I was properly taken care of if something happened to you. Frank's jaw tightened. Go on. Then I found something in Roger's jacket. A flash drive. I copied it before he noticed it was missing. Katie reached into her pocket and produced a small USB drive. I haven't looked at what's on it. I was afraid to. Frank took the drive. You did good, Katie. Really good. There's something else. Mom kept meeting with this woman, Patricia Whitaker. She's the wife of that state senator, Leonard Whitaker. Frank exchanged glances with Tommy, who had been silently observing from the corner. The head of the Veterans Affairs Committee? Katie nodded. They would meet at this coffee shop near campus. Very secretive. Once, I saw Patricia hand Mom an envelope. Mom looked scared after reading whatever was inside. Tommy pulled out his phone, showing Katie a photograph. Is this the woman? Katie studied the image. That's her. Patricia Whitaker has been on our radar, Tommy explained to Frank. Her husband controls millions in veterans' benefits appropriations. There have been rumors about funds being diverted, but nothing solid. Frank stood, pacing the small room. So Treadwell connects to the cartel, Marla connects to Treadwell, and now there's a link to a state senator through his wife. This is bigger than a cheating spouse. We need to see what's on that drive, Tommy said. Frank inserted the flash drive into his laptop. The screen filled with documents, financial records, service member information, death benefits data for Marines in Frank's unit. This is classified material, Frank said quietly. Service records, deployment schedules, next of kin information for my entire unit. This would be worth millions to the right people. Or to people targeting military families for scams, Tommy added. The question is, how did Treadwell get this information? Katie's voice was small but determined. I think I know. Mom's insurance office handles military family policies. She has access to beneficiary information. The pieces clicked into place for Frank. They were using military families' information for something. Stealing identities? Redirecting benefit payments. Tommy was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone at the bureau. When he hung up, his expression was grim. We found a pattern. 5 Marines from your unit who died in action in the past 2 years. Their death benefits never reached their families. The money was diverted through a series of shell companies. Total amount, nearly $7 million. Frank felt sick. And Whitaker? His committee would investigate any complaints about missing benefits. He could bury evidence, redirect inquiries. So what now? Katie asked. Frank's expression hardened. Now we set a trap. Tommy, I need a favor, a big one. Name it. Leak to the press that I've been killed in action. Make it look official. Katie gasped. Dad, no. It's the only way to flush them out. If they think I'm dead, they'll move to collect the death benefit. When they do, we'll have them. Tommy hesitated. That's not exactly by the book, Rhett. Neither is stealing from fallen Marines' families. Will you help me or not? After a long moment, Tommy nodded. I'll make some calls, but you'll need to disappear completely. No contact with anyone. Frank turned to Katie. I need you to go back to school. Act normal. Can you do that? Katie straightened her shoulders. For you, Dad? Anything. As they formulated their plan, None of them noticed the small red of a laser sight briefly appearing on the safe house window, then disappearing into the night. Chapter 4. Ghost Protocol. The headline in the Washington Post read, "Decorated Marine Master Sergeant Frank Dawson killed in covert operation." The accompanying photograph showed Frank in his dress blues, stern-faced, and decorated with combat medals. The article detailed his distinguished service record and mentioned the ongoing investigation into the attack that had allegedly taken his life. In reality, Frank was very much alive, watching the news coverage from a cabin 40 miles outside of Richmond. The property belonged to his former commanding officer, Colonel James Granite Wilson, now retired and living in Florida. The remote location, surrounded by dense woods and accessible only by a dirt road, provided the perfect cover. "How's it feel to be dead?" Tommy asked, tossing a burner phone onto the table. Frank continued cleaning his service pistol. "Peaceful. Any movement from Marla?" "Released on bail this morning." Senator Whitaker's office issued a statement expressing deep concern for the widow of a fallen hero and offering legal assistance. How generous of him. Frank reassembled the pistol with practiced efficiency. And Treadwell? Still in the hospital under guard, but conscious. His lawyer is arguing for compassionate release due to medical needs. Compassionate, Frank repeated coldly. What about the money trail? Tommy opened his laptop, displaying a complex diagram of financial transactions. We've identified 3 shell companies that received diverted death benefits. All 3 trace back to an offshore account in the Caymans, but we hit a wall there. We need someone with direct access to authorize the transfer from your death benefit to catch them in the act. Marla has that access. Exactly. And now that you're dead, she'll be contacted about claiming your benefits. Frank nodded. How's Katie holding up? Back at school as planned. We have an agent posing as a transfer student in her dorm. She's being watched 24/7. A notification pinged on Tommy's laptop. We've got movement. Marla just booked a flight to Grand Cayman for tomorrow morning. That was fast. Too fast, Tommy agreed. Your death was only announced 12 hours ago. Normal benefits processing takes weeks. Frank smiled grimly. Unless they already had the paperwork prepared. I'll book us on the same flight. No. Frank stood, checking his watch. I need you to follow a different lead. Patricia Whitaker made 3 visits to the hospital where Treadwell is being held. Find out what they discussed. And you? I'm going to the Caymans to see what my loving wife does with my death benefit. The following evening, Frank sat at an outdoor cafe in Georgetown, Grand Cayman, wearing sunglasses and a Panama hat that shadowed his face. From his position, he had a clear view of the entrance to First Caribbean International Bank across the street. At precisely 3:15 p.m., a taxi pulled up, and Marla stepped out wearing a black dress and sunglasses, playing the part of the grieving widow. She entered the bank, emerging 40 minutes later with a small briefcase. Instead of returning to her hotel, she walked 6 blocks to a marina where luxury yachts were docked. Frank followed at a distance, using the crowd for cover. At the marina, Marla boarded a sleek white yacht named Sovereign Immunity, an ironic name that wasn't lost on Frank. He snapped photos with a telephoto lens as 3 men greeted her on board. One he recognized as Leonard Whitaker. The others were unfamiliar, but their bearings suggested military or law enforcement background. Frank's burner phone vibrated. A text from Tommy, Treadwell talking. Says your wife part of scheme targeting military families for 5 years. 32 victims. Whitaker protected operation. Another text followed. Patricia Whitaker found dead in home. Apparent suicide. Left note confessing to conspiracy. Frank's blood ran cold. They were tying up loose ends. He watched as Whitaker embraced Marla, their body language suggesting intimacy beyond professional collaboration. The yacht's engine started, and it began moving away from the dock. Frank returned to his hotel room and opened his laptop, connecting to a secure server. Years ago, as a precaution, he had installed tracking software on Marla's devices. He activated it now, watching as her phone's GPS signal moved farther out to sea. Another call from Tommy interrupted his monitoring. You need to get back here now. Treadwell's dead. What happened? Guard found him this morning. Apparent heart attack, but the timing is suspicious. And there's something else. Katie's protection detail lost contact 2 hours ago. Frank's world narrowed to a single point of focus. What are you saying? Your daughter's missing, Rhett. We think someone took her. Chapter 5. Blood in the Water. The sound of racing engines echoed across the water as Frank piloted the rented speedboat toward the distant yacht. The tracking software showed Marla's phone still aboard the Sovereign Immunity, now anchored in a secluded cove on the island's far side. His sat phone rang. "Tommy, tell me you found her," Frank answered. "Not yet, but we have a lead." Katie's roommate received a video call from Katie's phone. The caller didn't show their face, but gave coordinates and a message. "Tell Dawson he's not as dead as he thinks." Midnight exchange. Coordinates. Point about 3 miles off Grand Cayman. Sending them now. Frank checked the incoming data against his GPS. "That's where the yacht is anchored. They knew I was coming." "It's a trap, Rhett. Wait for backup. I've got a team boarding a plane now. My daughter doesn't have that kind of time." Frank ended the call and throttled the engine to maximum. As he approached the yacht, Frank cut the engine and drifted the final 100 yards. The night provided cover as he slipped into the water and swam silently toward the vessel. 15 years of Special Forces training had prepared him for precisely this type of infiltration. Frank climbed aboard at the stern, where blind spots in the yacht's security cameras created a window of opportunity. He moved silently along the deck, staying low. Through a window, he counted 4 armed men in the main cabin. Marla sat among them, laughing as she sipped champagne. No sign of Whitaker or Katie. Moving to the lower deck, Frank heard muffled crying. Following the sound, he found a small storage room locked from the outside. Inside, Katie sat tied to a chair, her face bruised. "Dad?" she whispered in disbelief as he entered. "Chill. I'm getting you out of here." Frank cut her restraints. "Can you walk?" Katie nodded, wiping tears. "They said you were dead." "Not yet." "Where's Whitaker?" "Upper deck office. Mom's been with him." "Dad, they killed a woman, Patricia. I heard them talking about it." Frank checked the corridor. "We need to move. There's a lifeboat on the port side." As they crept toward the exit, a voice called from behind. "Touching reunion." Frank whirled to find Leonard Whitaker pointing a pistol at them. The senator was immaculately dressed in a white linen suit, incongruous with the weapon in his hand. "Master Sergeant Dawson, the reports of your death were premature." "Let my daughter go," Frank said evenly. "This is between us." Whitaker smiled coldly. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. You've become a significant liability to a very profitable operation." "Stealing from dead Marines? That's your profitable operation?" "A crude characterization. We prefer to think of it as resource reallocation. The dead have no use for money, after all." Frank positioned himself between Katie and Whitaker. "How many families have you stolen from?" 32, as your friend Treadwell so helpfully confirmed before his unfortunate passing. "A shame about his heart condition." "And Patricia? Did she have a heart condition too?" Whitaker's smile faltered slightly. "My wife became a liability, much like your Marla is becoming. Women, so emotional, so unpredictable when pressure mounts." From above came the sound of footsteps. Frank calculated his options. One armed opponent in front, unknown number approaching, Katie to protect. "You won't make it off this boat alive," Whitaker continued. "But I'm a reasonable man. Tell me who else knows about our operation, and I'll make it quick for both of you." Frank locked eyes with Katie, giving her an almost imperceptible nod. Years ago, he had taught her a defensive move for exactly this type of situation. "No one else knows," Frank lied. "I came alone." A noble but futile gesture. Whitaker raised his pistol. Frank dropped to one knee as Katie lunged sideways, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. She discharged it directly at Whitaker, filling the corridor with white powder. Frank surged forward through the cloud, disarming Whitaker with a swift strike to the wrist followed by an elbow to the temple. The senator crumpled, unconscious. "Nice work," Frank told Katie as he secured Whitaker with the man's own belt. "Just like we practiced." "What now?" Frank retrieved Whitaker's pistol. "Now we find your mother." Marla Dawson stood at the yacht's bow, staring into the darkness when Frank appeared behind her. "Hello, Marla." She didn't turn, didn't even flinch at the voice of her supposedly dead husband. "I wondered when you'd show up. Always the hero. Where are the others?" "Below deck, counting the money. Your death benefit was quite substantial, 2 million plus. The government values its killers." Frank moved beside her, keeping the pistol low but ready. 32 families. You stole from 32 families of dead Marines." Now Marla turned, her face hardened with contempt. "Do you know what it's like being married to a ghost?" 15 years of wondering if today's the day I get the folded flag. I deserved compensation. And Katie? Did she deserve to be kidnapped? Beaten? Something flickered in Marla's eyes, perhaps the last remnant of maternal instinct. That wasn't the plan. Whitaker panicked after Treadwell started talking. I wanted to keep her safe. By bringing her to a yacht full of killers? Better than what Whitaker planned. Marla glanced toward the cabin. He wanted to dump her at sea. I convinced him she was valuable as leverage. Frank's grip on the pistol tightened. You're going to help me get her off this boat. And then what? Turn myself in? Spend the rest of my life in prison? That's more than you deserve. Marla laughed bitterly. You self-righteous bastard. While you were playing hero overseas, I was building this. 5 years of work, millions in untraceable funds. I'm not throwing that away. The yacht suddenly rocked as an explosion tore through the lower deck. Flames erupted from below, illuminating the night sky. What did you do? Frank demanded. Marla smiled. Insurance policy. The yacht's rigged to sink. Evidence gone, along with anyone who could testify. Katie's down there. The lifeboat on the starboard side is gone. She's smart, your daughter. Takes after her father. Frank glanced over the rail and saw a small lifeboat moving away from the burning yacht. This is over, Marla. The FBI knows everything. Not quite everything. Marla reached into her pocket and Frank tensed, but she withdrew only a flash drive. This contains accounts, contacts, everything about the operation. My get-out-of-jail card. Another explosion rocked the yacht, larger than the first. The deck tilted as the vessel began taking on water. You have about 3 minutes before this boat goes under, Marla said calmly. Take the drive, save yourself. Or try to round up Whitaker and his men. Your choice. Frank grabbed the drive. This doesn't change anything. You're going to answer for what you've done. Marla stepped back, her smile enigmatic. Goodbye, Frank. Before he could stop her, Marla vaulted over the rail, diving into the dark water below. By the time Frank reached the edge, she had disappeared beneath the waves. The yacht was sinking rapidly now, flames consuming the upper deck. Frank made his way to the port side, where an emergency raft was stored. As he deployed it, he heard shooting below. Whitaker's men, perhaps, discovering their boss bound and unconscious. Frank pushed away from the dying yacht, watching as it slipped beneath the surface in a final hiss of steam and flame. In the distance, he could see Katie's lifeboat, now joined by approaching Coast Guard vessels responding to the fire. As he paddled toward them, Frank clutched the flash drive Marla had given him. Whatever game she was playing wasn't over yet. Chapter 6. Ashes and Shadows. 1 week after the yacht incident, Frank sat in a secure briefing room at FBI headquarters in Washington. The table before him was covered with photographs and documents, evidence of the conspiracy that had nearly claimed his family. Tommy entered, placing a cup of coffee in front of Frank. Lab confirmed the bodies recovered from the yacht. 3 of Whitaker's security team, all former military with dishonorable discharges. No sign of Whitaker himself or your wife. Frank wasn't surprised. They survived. Looks that way. Coast Guard found a damaged speedboat on a private beach 20 miles from the sinking. Witnesses report seeing a man and woman matching their descriptions boarding a private plane that night. Destination? Unknown. But the plane's tail number traces to a shell company connected to the Montega cartel. Your wife may have had a backup plan all along. Frank stared at the photos of the recovered bodies. What about the flash drive? Cybersecurity teams still working on it. Heavily encrypted, but they've accessed some files. It's worse than we thought, Rhett. The operation wasn't just targeting Marines in your unit. It was nationwide. Veterans from all branches, hundreds of families affected. Total amount, conservatively, $50 million over 5 years. And it wasn't just death benefits. VA disability payments, pension funds, anything connected to military service. Frank's jaw tightened, and Whitaker's committee provided cover. Perfect position to bury complaints, redirect investigations. We've found evidence of at least 3 whistleblowers who died under suspicious circumstances after contacting his office. The door opened, and Director Harrison Barnes entered. In his mid-60s with silver hair and the bearing of a former Marine, Barnes commanded immediate respect. Master Sergeant Dawson, Barnes nodded. I've reviewed your actions. Unorthodox, but given the circumstances, justified. Thank you, sir. What happens now? Officially, We've opened a multi-agency investigation into benefit fraud targeting military families. Arrests are already being made. Bank officials, VA employees, insurance processors who facilitated the scheme. And unofficially, Barnes exchanged glances with Tommy. Unofficially, Senator Whitaker represents a delicate situation. He has connections throughout Washington, friends in high places. He kidnapped my daughter. Tried to kill us both. I understand your frustration, but we need to proceed carefully. If Whitaker has indeed fled to cartel territory, that complicates matters further. Frank stood, his patience evaporating. With all due respect, Director, while you're proceeding carefully, Whitaker and my wife are escaping justice. They stole from fallen heroes and their families. Barnes held up a hand. I'm not finished, Master Sergeant. Given the sensitivity of this situation, we're authorizing a specialized retrieval operation. Off the books. Frank sat back down. I'm listening. We have intelligence suggesting Whitaker is headed to a cartel compound in Sonora, Mexico, presumably to negotiate protection in exchange for information or funds. Your wife is likely with him. You want me to go after them? Barnes nodded. You have unique qualifications for this mission and personal motivation that ensures commitment. We can provide tactical support, intelligence, transportation, but officially, this conversation never happened. If I find them, primary objective is recovery of additional evidence stored on Whitaker's personal devices. Secondary objective is apprehension for return to U.S. soil to face justice. And if apprehension isn't possible, Barnes' expression remained impassive. Then ensure they can't continue their operation elsewhere, by any means necessary. Tommy looked concerned. Director, are you authorizing? I'm authorizing Master Sergeant Dawson to use his judgment in the field, Barnes interrupted. Nothing more, nothing less. Frank considered the offer. What about Katie? She'll remain under our protection until the threat is neutralized. After a moment, Frank nodded. When do I leave? Tonight. Agent Blackwood will brief you on the details. Barnes stood to leave, then paused. One more thing, Dawson. As far as official records are concerned, you're still dead. That status provides certain operational freedoms. Use them wisely. After the director left, Tommy turned to Frank. You sure about this, Rhett? Going after a U.S. senator in cartel territory, that's a one-way ticket. Frank's expression was resolute. They threatened my daughter. Stole from the families of fallen Marines. There's only one way this ends. I'm coming with you. No. Katie needs someone she can trust here. Besides, where I'm going, a federal agent would be a liability. Tommy reluctantly nodded. At least take this. He slid a satellite phone across the table. Direct line to me, completely secure. And this. He produced a small metal case. New identity, credentials, background that will hold up to scrutiny. As of now, you're Michael Tanner, private security consultant with clearance to operate in Mexico. Frank pocketed the phone and opened the case, examining his new identity. One last thing. I need to see Katie before I go. Katie Dawson sat across from her father in the safe house living room, struggling to maintain composure. How long will you be gone? She asked. As long as it takes. Frank squeezed her hand. A few weeks, maybe more. And if you don't come back, then you'll be taken care of. Tommy will make sure of it. Katie's eyes filled with tears. I can't lose you too, Dad. You won't. But I need to do this, not just for us, but for all the families they stole from. People who deserved better. Mom really is gone, isn't she? The person we thought she was. Frank chose his words carefully. The mother who raised you, who loved you. I believe that part of her was real. But somewhere along the way, she made choices that can't be undone. Katie wiped her eyes. What happens when you find her? Justice happens. They sat in silence for a moment before Katie spoke again. I found something in Mom's things at home. After everything went down, I asked Tommy to let me get some clothes. She handed Frank a small leather-bound journal. It's Mom's diary. I only read parts, but it might help you understand. Frank took the journal, thumbing through pages of Marla's elegant handwriting. Thank you. Promise me one thing, Katie said, her voice suddenly firm. Whatever happens with Mom, come back to me. Frank embraced his daughter. That's a promise I intend to keep. As Frank drove toward Andrews Air Force Base that evening, where a transport would take him to the Mexican border, he reflected on the journal entries he'd read. Marla's descent hadn't been sudden. It had been a gradual erosion of principles, beginning with resentment over his deployments, escalating to rationalization of smaller thefts, and eventually full participation in Whitaker's scheme. One entry, dated 3 years earlier, stood out. I met with Leonard again today. He says with my access to beneficiary information, we could expand beyond his original plan. The families never notice. They're too grief-stricken to check the numbers. It's almost too easy. Sometimes I wonder what Frank would think, but then I remember, he chose the Marines over us long ago. Maybe this is my own kind of service. Frank closed the journal, his resolve hardening. The woman he had married was gone, replaced by someone he barely recognized. And soon, he would bring her to justice, one way or another. Chapter 7, Desert Shadows. The Sonoran Desert stretched before Frank like an alien landscape, harsh and unforgiving under the midday sun. He adjusted the scope on his rifle, focusing on the compound 2 kilometers away. From his vantage point atop a rocky ridge, he had maintained surveillance for 3 days, documenting movements and security patterns. The cartel compound was impressive, a former hacienda transformed into a fortress with modern security systems and armed guards. Satellite imagery had confirmed Whitaker's arrival 5 days earlier, accompanied by a woman matching Marla's description. They hadn't left since. Frank checked his watch. In 20 minutes, his diversion would begin at the compound's east perimeter, a controlled brush fire that would draw attention and resources away from his planned entry point on the western wall. His sat phone vibrated. Tommy. Status. Frank answered quietly. We've got movement. Intercepted communications indicate Montega himself is en route to the compound. ETA 90 minutes. Frank frowned. Salvador Montega, head of the cartel, rarely left his primary residence. Why would he come personally? Unknown, but it can't be good. Whatever Whitaker and Marla brought to the table, it's valuable enough for Montega to take an interest. Or they're a liability he wants to address personally. Either way, this complicates things. You should consider pulling back, waiting for a better opportunity. Frank watched as a black SUV entered the compound. Negative. This may be our only shot. Montega's arrival means they'll all be in one place. It also means triple the security. I'm proceeding as planned, commencing operation in 15 minutes. Before Tommy could protest further, Frank ended the call and resumed his preparations. From his pack, he withdrew 4 remote detonated charges, non-lethal smoke devices that would create confusion rather than casualties. His objective was evidence and apprehension, not a body count. As the minutes ticked by, Frank thought of Katie, safe but anxious thousands of miles away. He thought of the 32 families who had lost loved ones only to be victimized again by Whitaker and Marla's scheme. He thought of his fellow Marines, whose sacrifice had been exploited for profit. At the appointed time, Frank activated the first diversion. From his position, he watched smoke rise from the eastern perimeter as the brush fire caught. Guards ran toward it, exactly as anticipated. Frank moved quickly down the ridge, approaching the compound from the western side, where security was thinnest. The wall here was older, with footholds he had identified during reconnaissance. He scaled it in 30 seconds, dropping silently into an area of dense vegetation within the compound grounds. Moving through the gardens using the training that had kept him alive in far more hostile environments, Frank approached the main house. According to intel, Whitaker and Marla were staying in the guest quarters in the north wing. Frank needed to reach them before Montega arrived. He activated the second diversion, smoke charges placed near the compound's generators. When they detonated, alarms blared and the compound was plunged into darkness as backup power systems engaged. In the confusion, Frank slipped into the main house through a service entrance. Inside, he encountered 2 guards running toward the disturbance. Frank disabled them with precise strikes, efficient, non-lethal, leaving them unconscious but breathing. He acquired one of their radios, listening to the panicked Spanish communications as he moved deeper into the house. The guest quarters were on the 2nd floor. Frank climbed the grand staircase, encountering no further resistance. Most security personnel had responded to the external threats. At the top of the stairs, he paused, hearing voices from behind a mahogany door. Can't trust Montega, Whitaker was saying, his voice strained. He's coming to tie up loose ends, not negotiate. We have leverage, Marla responded coolly. The information on that drive is worth millions to the right buyers. You think he cares? He'll take what we have and dispose of us. We need to leave now. And go where? The FBI is watching every border, every airport. Frank positioned himself beside the door, preparing to breach. Through a gap in the curtained window, he could see Whitaker pacing while Marla sat calmly at a desk, typing on a laptop. There, Marla said. Transfer complete. Now we have insurance. Whitaker moved to look over her shoulder. What did you do? Backed up everything to my private server. If anything happens to us, it automatically releases to every major news outlet. Montega's operations, his government connections, everything. That's suicide. No, that's leverage. Montega is a businessman. He'll understand the concept of mutually assured destruction. Frank had heard enough. He breached the door with a swift kick, entering with his weapon raised. Federal agent. Hands where I can see them. Whitaker froze, his face draining of color. Marla showed no surprise at all, slowly raising her hands with an eerie calm. Hello, Frank, she said. Right on schedule. Something in her tone sent warning signals through Frank's mind. This wasn't the reaction of someone caught off guard. Step away from the computer, Frank ordered. Both of you, on the floor, hands behind your heads. Whitaker complied immediately, dropping to his knees in terror. Marla, however, remained seated. I've been expecting you, she said. Ever since the yacht. I knew you wouldn't let it go. I said on the floor. Or what? You'll shoot your daughter's mother? The woman you once loved? Marla stood slowly. I know you, Frank. Better than you know yourself. You don't know me at all. Not anymore. Her smile was cold. Don't I? I knew exactly when you'd come, how you'd create a diversion, even which entry point you'd use. Why do you think security was so light on the West Wall? The realization hit Frank like a physical blow. You wanted me to get in. Of course. You're the final piece of the puzzle. Behind Frank, the door opened. He whirled to find himself facing Salvador Montega, a man whose photograph he had studied in briefings. Montega was in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that didn't quite hide the bulge of a shoulder holster. Master Sergeant Dawson. Montega greeted him in accented English. Or should I say, the ghost of Sergeant Dawson? Your reputation precedes you. Frank kept his weapon steady, mind racing through rapidly diminishing options. You're making a mistake, Montega. The FBI knows I'm here. If I don't report back, they'll come looking. Montega laughed. With what jurisdiction? This is Mexico, my friend. And officially, you're already dead. He doesn't know, does he? Marla said, moving to stand beside Montega. He hasn't figured it out yet. Figured what out? Frank demanded. Montega gestured to one of his guards, who handed him a tablet. He turned it to show Frank live surveillance footage of Katie sitting in what appeared to be the safe house living room. You see, Sergeant, your wife has been working with me for years. Long before Whitaker and his pathetic scheme. She was my eyes and ears into U.S. military operations, particularly those targeting my organization. Frank felt the blood drain from his face. You're lying. Am I? How do you think Treadwell obtained classified deployment schedules? How do you think ambushes were arranged for convoys carrying evidence against my operations? Your wife has been very useful. He's manipulating you, Frank said to Marla. Once he has what he wants, you're expendable. Marla's expression showed no doubt. I've made arrangements to ensure my continued value. The information I've gathered over the years, it doesn't just implicate the senator's operation. It exposes government officials, military contractors, everyone who facilitated or turned a blind eye to Salvador's activities. Why? Why betray everything? Betray me? Because you betrayed me first. Marla's composure cracked for the first time. 15 years, Frank. 15 years of being a military wife, alone, afraid, subordinating my life to your service. Do you know what that does to a person? So this is revenge. This is survival. The money Whitaker and I diverted, that was just the beginning. Salvador has offered me a place in his organization. Real power, not just reflected glory as a soldier's wife. Frank's mind raced, calculating odds, searching for a way out. And Katie? Was threatening her part of your plan too? Something flickered in Marla's eyes, perhaps the last remnant of maternal feeling. That was Treadwell's mistake. He wasn't supposed to involve her. Yet here we are, Montega interrupted, with your daughter as insurance for your cooperation. What do you want from me? Your expertise, your access codes, your knowledge of U.S. military counter-narcotics operations. In exchange, your daughter remains unharmed. Frank lowered his weapon slightly. And if I refuse? Montega nodded to a guard, who placed a sat phone on the table. Call her. Confirm she's alive. Then decide. Frank took the phone, dialing Katie's number from memory. She answered on the second ring. Dad, Katie, are you all right? I'm fine. 2 men came to the safe house. They have guns, but they haven't hurt me. Her voice was steady, controlled. Frank had taught her well. They said as long as you cooperate, I'll be okay. I'll get you out of this. I promise. Dad, do you remember what you taught me about hostage situations? Katie's voice took on a particular cadence. Rule 3, right? Frank's mind flashed to their family drills, his way of preparing Katie for worst-case scenarios. Rule 3. Create distance between hostages when possible. I remember, he said carefully. Stay calm. I'm coming for you. The call ended, and Frank turned to Montega. I need proof she'll be released if I cooperate. You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Montega replied. But I am a man of my word. Help us, and when we're done, she goes free. Frank's expression hardened. No. Release her first, then I'll help you. Montega considered him for a moment, then nodded to one of his men. Tell our associates to move the girl to the secondary location. Keep her there until I give further instructions. The guard left to make the call. Marla approached Frank, standing uncomfortably close. You're doing the right thing, she said. For once, put our daughter first. Frank met her gaze. I've always put her first. That's the difference between us. Across the room, Senator Whitaker remained on his knees, forgotten in the larger drama. His political instincts for self-preservation had kept him silent, but now he spoke up. What about me? We had a deal, Montega. The cartel leader glanced at him dismissively. Our arrangement has changed, Senator. Your usefulness has expired. Before Whitaker could protest further, the compound was rocked by an explosion, much larger than Frank's diversions. Gunfire erupted outside. Montega grabbed his radio, barking orders in Spanish. The response seemed to alarm him. We're under attack, he announced. Federal police, backed by DEA. Frank seized the moment of confusion. With a swift move, he disarmed the nearest guard, simultaneously kicking the second man's knee with a sickening crack. As the guard fell, Frank fired 2 precise shots, one disabling Montega's shoulder, the second hitting Marla's laptop, destroying it. No! Marla screamed, lunging for the ruined computer. Frank backed toward the door. Tommy sends his regards. Turns out, I'm not the only one who can set a trap. Montega, clutching his bleeding shoulder, glared with cold fury. You're dead, Dawson. You and your daughter both. Actually, Frank replied. I'm already dead, remember? That's what gives me freedom to do this. He fired again, the bullet striking inches from Montega's head, a deliberate miss. That was a warning. Come after my daughter again. There won't be a second one. As Frank retreated into the hallway, Marla called after him. You can't win this, Frank. They'll hunt you forever. Frank's final glimpse was of his wife, the woman he had once loved, now transformed into someone unrecognizable, standing amid the chaos she had helped create. Outside, the compound had erupted into a war zone. DEA agents and Mexican federal police engaged cartel gunmen across the grounds. Frank moved through the confusion, using the tactical training that had served him for 15 years. His sat phone vibrated. Tommy. Cutting it close, Frank answered. Couldn't risk warning you earlier. Raid was planned after we traced the call to Katie's phone. She okay? They've moved her to a secondary location. Coordinates. Working on it. Get to the extraction point. Chopper's waiting. As Frank made his way toward the designated landing zone, he knew the battle was far from over. Marla and Montega had escaped in the chaos, and somewhere, Katie was still in danger. But for the first time since this began, Frank had allies, resources, and most importantly, the element of surprise. The hunt had just begun. Chapter 8. Truth and Consequences. Dawn broke over the mountains as the helicopter touched down at a remote DEA forward operating base near the Arizona-Mexico border. Frank jumped out, ducking under the slowing rotors, and was met by Tommy and a team of tactical agents. Any word on Katie? Frank asked immediately. Tommy nodded. She's safe. The team monitoring the call traced it to a location in Tucson. Local FBI raided it 30 minutes ago. 2 hostiles neutralized. Katie secured. She's en route here now. Relief washed over Frank. And Marla? Montega? Escaped during the raid, along with Whitaker. We've got lookouts at airports, border crossings, major highways. They won't get far. Inside the command center, a series of interconnected trailers filled with communications equipment and tactical gear. Frank was briefed by DEA Special Agent Carla Vega, a veteran of cartel operations with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. The raid recovered significant intelligence, Vega explained, spreading photos across the table. Financial records, communication logs, blackmail material. Montega kept detailed files on his allies and enemies alike, including evidence of Marla's involvement. Frank asked. Vega tapped a file. Years of it. Your wife wasn't just passing information. She was actively coordinating between Montega and corrupt officials on both sides of the border. Senator Whitaker was merely one part of a much larger operation. How did she hide it for so long? Compartmentalization. Classic intelligence tradecraft. The evidence suggests she was recruited during a period when you were deployed in Afghanistan, approached through a veteran support group run by one of Montega's front organizations. The revelation hit Frank like a physical blow. The veterans group had been his suggestion, a way for Marla to connect with other military spouses during his absence. There's more, Tommy added reluctantly. The data recovered from Montega's servers includes details of operations compromised by leaked intelligence. Operations you were involved in. Frank's mind raced back through missions gone wrong. Ambushes that seemed too well coordinated. Targets who disappeared just before raids. How many? 7 confirmed incidents. 3 resulted in casualties. Names and faces flashed through Frank's memory. Brothers in arms lost in operations that had inexplicably failed. Men who had trusted him with their lives. Who had died while the intelligence they needed was being funneled to the enemy by his own wife. The door opened, and Katie rushed in. Frank embraced her tightly, checking her for injuries. I'm okay, Dad, she assured him. They didn't hurt me. Just scared me a lot. You did good, following the protocols we practiced. Katie managed a weak smile. Rule 3. Create distance between hostages. When they moved me, I left behind the emergency beacon you gave me last year. Frank looked at his daughter with pride. Even in extremis, she had kept her head, remembered her training. We need to talk about Mom, Katie said quietly. I know, but first, we need to make sure you're safe. Agent Vega interrupted. We have a development. Highway Patrol just reported a vehicle matching the description of Montega's convoy heading west on Interstate 10. They're about an hour from Phoenix. Phoenix? Frank frowned. Why there? The logical escape route would be south, deeper into Mexico where Montega has more control. Unless they're not running, Tommy suggested. Phoenix has a major international airport. Private hangars, minimal customs oversight for certain flights. They're trying to leave the country, Frank realized. Montega has operations in Colombia, Venezuela, and significant banking relationships in the Caymans, Vega added, where your wife was recently establishing new accounts. Frank turned to Katie. I need you to stay here with Tommy. I'm going after them. Dad, no. You promised. And I'll keep that promise. But this ends today. Tommy stepped forward. You're not going alone. This is an official operation now, which means rules of engagement, jurisdictional concerns, paperwork. They'll be gone before you cut through the red tape. What are you suggesting? Frank's expression hardened. I'm still officially dead, remember? Dead men don't need warrants. After a tense silence, Vega spoke. I can give you a 2-hour head start. Tactical support, transponder codes to bypass airport security. But after that, we come in by the book. That's all I need. The private airfield outside Phoenix catered to the ultra-wealthy and those who valued discretion above all else. Its security was designed to keep paparazzi and uninvited guests out while asking minimal questions of its clientele. Frank approached in a borrowed DEA vehicle, using the transponder codes Vega had provided to bypass the main security gate. According to airport records, a Gulfstream G650 registered to a Cayman Islands shell company was scheduled for departure within the hour. Its flight plan listed Bogotá as the destination, with a fuel stop in Cancun. Parking in a maintenance area, Frank changed into coveralls appropriated from the DEA's undercover division. With an airport ID clipped to his chest and a toolbox in hand, he blended perfectly with the ground crew preparing aircraft for departure. Through high-powered binoculars, he observed the target hangar. 2 SUVs with tinted windows were parked outside, with armed men establishing a perimeter. Montega wasn't taking chances. Frank's earpiece crackled. Sitrep, Tommy's voice requested. Target confirmed at location. Counting 8 visible security personnel. No visual on primary targets yet. Satellite thermal showing approximately 12 warm bodies inside the hangar. Aircraft appears fueled and ready for departure. Roger that. Proceeding with infiltration. Frank moved toward the hangar, maintaining the deliberate pace of a maintenance worker going about routine business. One of Montega's men gave him a cursory glance but didn't challenge him. Another advantage of the right uniform in the right place. At the service entrance, Frank swiped the access card Vega had provided. Inside, the massive space was dominated by the sleek Gulfstream. Ground crew were completing final checks while pilots reviewed flight plans in the cockpit. Frank spotted them near the aircraft stairs. Montega, his wounded shoulder now bandaged. Whitaker, looking disheveled and frightened. And Marla, composed as ever, directing the loading of several metal cases onto the plane. Moving behind equipment carts for cover, Frank worked his way closer. He needed to capture them alive if possible. Their testimony was crucial to dismantling the entire network. From his position, Frank could now hear their conversation. The accounts are secured? Montega was asking Marla. Transferred and verified. 78 million total, distributed across 11 jurisdictions. Untraceable. And the insurance policy? Marla patted a silver laptop case. All here, plus backups in secure locations. If anything happens to us, it goes public automatically. Whitaker paced nervously. We need to leave now. The FBI will have figured out our destination. Patience, Senator, Montega said coldly. My pilots are completing final checks. We depart when I say we depart. Frank activated his earpiece. Tommy, targets confirmed. Request backup at my position. Subjects preparing for imminent departure. Copy that. Strike team is 15 minutes out. We don't have 15 minutes. Frank assessed his options. Direct confrontation was suicide against superior numbers. But if he could delay the departure until backup arrived. Moving to an electrical panel, Frank used his military training and sabotage techniques. With precise adjustments to the hangar's power systems, he triggered a cascading failure in the building's electronics. Lights flickered, then died. Emergency systems activated, bathing the hangar in dim red lighting. The distraction worked. Security personnel moved to investigate. Pilots emerged from the aircraft to check systems, and Montega barked orders to restore power quickly. In the confusion, Frank approached from behind as Marla stood separated from the others. He placed his pistol against her back. Don't move, he whispered. Don't speak. Marla tensed, but didn't resist as Frank guided her toward a storage area. Once out of sight, he zip-tied her wrists. How did you find us? She asked, remarkably calm. You're predictable, Frank replied. Money first, safety second. It's always been your pattern. And now what? You turn me in, testify against me, spend years in courts while our daughter watches her mother in prison jumpsuit. Justice isn't always clean, Marla, but it's necessary. She laughed softly. Justice? Is that what you call it? What about the justice for military wives left alone year after year? What about? Save it for your testimony, Frank interrupted. You betrayed your country, your daughter, your husband. But worst of all, you betrayed the families of fallen Marines, people who made the ultimate sacrifice while you profited from their loss. For the first time, something like doubt crossed Marla's face. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. It started small, just information about deployments, schedules, things that seemed harmless. Tell that to the men who died in those ambushes. Before Marla could respond, the storage room door burst open. Montega stood there, flanked by 2 armed guards. I thought I might find you here, Sergeant Dawson, Montega said, training a pistol on Frank. Your wife has become quite predictable in her betrayals. Frank kept his weapon pointed at Marla. It's over, Montega. Federal agents are surrounding this facility as we speak. Perhaps, but we'll be gone before they breach. Unless, of course, I'm forced to leave certain liabilities behind. Montega glanced meaningfully at Marla. Salvador, we had a deal, Marla protested. Circumstances change. You've become a vulnerability, a connection that can be traced. Dawson is right about one thing. You are predictable. Frank recognized the shift in dynamics. Montega was preparing to eliminate loose ends, Marla included. Despite everything, he couldn't let her be executed in cold blood. New plan, Frank announced. Marla comes with me. You and Whitaker can take your chances with the feds. Montega laughed. You're in no position to dictate terms, Sergeant. Are not. Frank raised his voice. Now, nothing happened. There was no backup to respond to his signal. But the momentary confusion was enough. Frank shoved Marlowe aside and fired twice, hitting one guard in the shoulder and forcing Montega to dive for cover. Gunfire erupted in the confined space. Frank rolled behind a storage cabinet, returning fire methodically. Through the chaos, he saw Marla crawling toward the door, still bound but determined to escape. Outside the storage room, shouts and more gunfire indicated the arrival of federal agents. Montega's men were now caught in a two-front battle. Frank used the distraction to advance, disarming a wounded guard and using him as a shield to approach Montega's position. The cartel leader fired wildly, his shots going wide as panic set in. It's over, Frank called out. Surrender now and you might live to see trial. Never, Montega spat, emerging with his weapon raised. Before either could fire, the wall behind Montega exploded inward as a tactical team breached the hangar. In the confusion, Montega turned toward the new threat, giving Frank his opening. 3 precise shots dropped the cartel leader to the ground, wounded but alive. As smoke filled the room, Tommy's voice called out. Federal agents. Weapons down. The remaining guards surrendered, dropping their weapons. Frank emerged with his hands visible. Suspect down but alive, he reported. Where's Whitaker? Captured trying to flee across the tarmac, Tommy replied. Where's Marla? Frank looked around. In the chaos, Marla had disappeared. She was here, hands bound. A shout from outside drew their attention. An agent was down, bleeding from a head wound. Nearby, a maintenance vehicle was speeding toward the perimeter fence. Frank spotted Marla behind the wheel, somehow freed from her restraints. Even from a distance, he could see her expression of grim determination as she crashed through the barrier and onto a service road beyond. Should we pursue? Tommy asked. Frank watched the vehicle disappear. No. We have Montega and Whitaker. We have the evidence. She's got nothing, no money, no allies, nowhere to go. She's still dangerous. She's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Frank holstered his weapon. We'll find her. But first, we make sure the others face justice. As agents secured the scene, Frank examined one of the metal cases that had been destined for the aircraft. Inside were hard drives, paper files, and digital storage devices, a treasure trove of evidence documenting years of corruption, theft, and betrayal. Tommy joined him. This is enough to put them away for life. Multiple life sentences, actually. And the families? The ones they stole from. We've already started the process of identifying victims and arranging restitution. It won't bring back what they lost, but it's something. Frank nodded slowly. It's a start. As they walked from the hangar, Frank's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over, Frank. Not by a long shot. Some secrets should stay buried. For Katie's sake, let me go. Frank showed the message to Tommy, who immediately began tracing procedures. She's threatening our daughter again, Frank said, his voice hardening. That's a mistake I can't let pass. Tommy placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll find her, Rhett. But right now, your daughter needs you more than Marla needs pursuing. Frank knew his friend was right. Katie had endured enough trauma. She needed stability, security, a father who put her first. But as they drove back to the DEA facility where Katie waited, Frank knew with cold certainty that his wife, the woman who had betrayed everything they once stood for, would eventually resurface. And when she did, he would be ready. The hunt wasn't over. It had merely entered a new phase. Chapter 9, Ghosts and Shadows. 6 months after the Phoenix airfield operation, Frank sat in a Washington, D.C. courtroom as Leonard Whitaker was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. The former senator, once powerful and connected, looked small in his orange jumpsuit as he was led away. Outside on the courthouse steps, Frank faced a barrage of reporters. Master Sergeant Dawson, how does it feel to see justice served? A journalist called out. It's a start, Frank replied. But true justice would restore what was stolen from 32 military families. It would bring back the 7 men who died because of compromised operations. And what about your wife? Any comment on the ongoing manhunt? Frank had expected the question. Marla remained at large, one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. My focus is on helping the victims, and rebuilding my life with my daughter. The authorities will handle the rest. Tommy, now promoted to assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division, waited in an SUV at the curb. Frank slid into the passenger seat, loosening his tie. "Good job in there," Tommy said. "Presidential commendation looks good on you." Frank glanced at the medal he'd received that morning in a private White House ceremony. Medals don't change what happened. No, but $78 million in recovered funds being returned to veterans' families makes a difference. Plus, Montega flipped on his entire network. Cartels are in disarray across 3 countries. And Marla? Tommy's expression grew serious. "That's actually why I'm here. We've got a lead, first solid one in months." Facial recognition caught her at a bank in Zurich 3 days ago. By the time local authorities responded, she was gone, but she left something behind. He handed Frank a sealed envelope. Inside was a memory card and a handwritten note. "For Katie, the truth she deserves to know. This doesn't erase what I've done, but it might help her understand. If you ever loved me, make sure she gets this. We've analyzed the data," Tommy explained. "It contains video confessions, documents detailing how she was recruited, names of handlers. Essentially, a roadmap of her involvement from the beginning. A conscience after all this time? More likely insurance. She's negotiating, offering information in exchange for consideration." Frank pocketed the memory card. "Or setting another trap. Either way, we're closing in. Interpol has alerts at every major border crossing, airport, and seaport in Europe. She's running out of places to hide." As they drove through Washington toward the Georgetown apartment Frank and Katie now called home, Frank reflected on the past 6 months. The transition to civilian life had been challenging but necessary. He had retired from the Marines with full honors, accepting a position as a security consultant for the Department of Defense. The flexible schedule allowed him to be present for Katie, who had transferred to Georgetown University to be closer to him. At the apartment, Katie was preparing dinner when Frank arrived. At 21, she had shown remarkable resilience in the face of trauma, though Frank knew she still attended weekly therapy sessions to process her mother's betrayal. "How'd it go?" she asked, embracing him. "Whitaker got 30 years. No possibility of parole." "Good." Katie returned to chopping vegetables. "Did they ask about Mom?" "They always do." A moment of silence passed between them, the specter of Marla Dawson never entirely absent from their lives. "Your mother left something for you," Frank said finally, placing the memory card on the counter. "It's been vetted by the FBI. No security concerns, but it's not easy viewing." Katie stared at the small device. "What's on it?" "Her version of events. Explanations, maybe apologies. It's up to you whether you want to see it." Katie picked up the card, turning it over in her fingers. "Do you think she's sorry?" "Really sorry." Frank chose his words carefully. "I think she regrets being caught. I think she misses you. Whether that qualifies as remorse is something only you can judge." After dinner, Katie retreated to her room with the memory card. Frank respected her privacy, settling in the living room with case files Tommy had shared, possible sightings of Marla across Europe, analysis of her likely movements and resources. Hours later, Katie emerged, eyes red from crying. "She blames you," Katie said, sitting beside Frank. "Says she felt abandoned during your deployments, used by the military system. Says she started small, just information about schedules, nothing that would put anyone at risk. Then it grew." "That's how it usually happens," Frank replied. "Small compromises that become larger betrayals. She mentioned people who died. Said she never meant for that to happen." Frank set aside the files. "Does that change how you feel?" Katie considered the question. "No. Understanding why someone did something terrible doesn't make it less terrible." After a pause, she added, "She says she's dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less." The revelation hit Frank unexpectedly. Medical records confirm this. She included test results from a Swiss hospital. Looks legitimate. Frank's mind raced with possibilities. A genuine diagnosis? A ploy for sympathy? A strategy to negotiate a more lenient surrender? "There's something else," Katie continued. "Coordinates." At the end of her message, she gave specific GPS coordinates. Said if you want the full truth, you'll find it there. "Did you tell Uncle Tommy?" Katie shook her head. "I wanted to talk to you first. Dad, do you think we should go?" "We? Absolutely not. If this is another trap. And if it's not? If she really is dying? Don't I deserve closure?" Frank had faced countless dangerous situations throughout his career, but few as complicated as this. His daughter was an adult, capable of making her own decisions. Yet the protective instinct remained powerful. "Let me check the coordinates first," he said finally. "If it looks safe, we'll discuss next steps." Later that night, after Katie had gone to bed, Frank examined the GPS location. It led to a small village in the French Alps, specifically a chalet registered to a shell company with obscured ownership. Satellite imagery showed a modest property, isolated but not completely remote. Local law enforcement records indicated no unusual activity in the area. Frank called Tommy, sharing the information. "Looks legitimate," Tommy said after running preliminary checks. "Property purchased 6 months ago through a series of fronts. Utility usage suggests occupancy. What's your play?" "I need to go there." "Not alone. Not officially. If this is legitimate, if she's really dying and offering full cooperation, we need to handle it delicately. A tactical team storming in would shut everything down." Tommy sighed. "You're talking about going off-book again. After everything that's happened, I'm talking about finishing this properly. For Katie's sake." After a long pause, Tommy relented. "I can give you 72 hours before I have to file an official report on the location. But you bring a tracking device, check in every 6 hours, and at the first sign of trouble, I send in a team." "Agreed. And Tommy, thank you. Just come back alive. Both of you." 3 days later, Frank and Katie stood at the base of a winding road leading to the Alpine chalet. Snow dusted the surrounding peaks despite the spring season, creating a pristine landscape that belied the tension of their mission. "Last chance to reconsider," Frank said, studying his daughter's face. Katie zipped her jacket against the mountain chill. "I need to do this, Dad. For myself." They approached cautiously, Frank scanning for surveillance systems or security measures. The chalet appeared unguarded, either a sign of confidence or confirmation that Marla truly had limited resources and time remaining. At the door, Frank positioned Katie behind him before knocking firmly. Long moments passed before the door opened. Marla Dawson stood before them, dramatically changed from the woman who had fled 6 months earlier. Her once vibrant auburn hair had thinned, her face gaunt and pale. She leaned on a cane, her body seemingly diminished. "You came," she said simply. "Both of you." "We did," Frank replied, maintaining a protective stance. Marla stepped back, inviting them inside. The chalet's interior was sparsely furnished but comfortable, with a fire crackling in a stone hearth. Medical equipment occupied one corner of the living room: oxygen tanks for stands, medication organizers. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer," Marla said, noticing Frank's assessment of the equipment. "Diagnosed 3 months ago. Too far advanced for effective treatment." "I'm sorry," Katie said automatically, then looked surprised at her own response. Marla smiled sadly. "No need. We're well beyond sympathy at this point." As they settled in the living room, the awkwardness between them was palpable. Frank remained vigilant, scanning the space for threats or inconsistencies in Marla's story. "The memory card was just the beginning," Marla continued. "What I have here is everything: names, dates, accounts, operations spanning 15 years. Not just Montega and Whitaker, but government officials, military contractors, intelligence operatives who facilitated or benefited from the arrangement." "Why now?" Frank asked. "Partly pragmatism. This information is my only remaining leverage. Partly," she glanced at Katie, "a desire to leave something better behind than what I've built so far." "Deathbed redemption?" Frank's tone was skeptical. "Nothing so noble. Let's call it a reckoning. I've had time to reflect on my choices. The results are not flattering." Katie, who had been silent, finally spoke. "You threatened me. Used me as leverage against Dad. How am I supposed to forgive that?" Marla didn't flinch from the accusation. "You're not. Some things are unforgivable. I crossed lines I never thought I would. The woman who raised you, who loved you, she was real, Katie. But so was the woman who betrayed that love. Both versions exist. Both are true." The rawness of her honesty seemed to affect Katie, who brushed away tears. "The information," Frank prompted, returning to the practical matters at hand. Marla indicated a laptop on the coffee table. "It's all there. Encrypted, with authentication protocols to verify its legitimacy. Names of operatives within the DEA, FBI, and Pentagon who provided protection for Montega's operations. banking information for payments, evidence of their involvement. This could trigger the biggest corruption scandal in decades, Frank said, examining the files. That's the idea. My final act. Ensuring that everyone pays, not just the convenient scapegoats. Frank uploaded samples of the data to the secure server Tommy had prepared, enabling immediate verification. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with confirmation. The information was authentic and potentially explosive. As night fell over the mountains, an uneasy truce settled in the chalet. Marla required medication and rest, retreating to her bedroom, while Frank maintained watch in the living room. Katie, emotionally exhausted, fell asleep on the sofa. Near midnight, Frank heard movement and found Marla standing at the picture window, gazing at the moonlit mountains. Beautiful, isn't it? She said without turning. Peaceful. Not a bad place to end things. Frank remained silent, keeping a cautious distance. You know what the hardest part is? Marla continued. Knowing that I could have had this, peace, family, honesty, if I'd made different choices. If I'd been stronger during those long deployments, less susceptible to resentment and flattery. It wasn't weakness that led you to betray your country, Frank replied. It was greed. Initially, perhaps, but it became something else over time. A parallel life where I had control, importance, value beyond being a military wife. The money was secondary to the power. And the men who died, were they secondary too? Marla turned, her face etched with genuine pain. Those are the ghosts I can't escape. The intelligence I passed, I told myself it was harmless. Administrative details, deployment schedules. When I learned operations had been compromised, people killed, I wanted out. But by then, they had too much leverage. There's always a choice, says the man whose moral compass never wavers. A hint of the old bitterness crept into her voice. Must be nice, seeing the world in black and white. I see the gray areas, Marla. I just don't use them as excuses. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. For what it's worth, and I know it's worth very little, I am sorry. Not just for being caught, but for the harm done. To those families. To Katie. To you. The apology, unexpected and seemingly sincere, caught Frank off guard. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated with an urgent message from Tommy. Compromised. Location leaked. Multiple hostiles approaching your position. ETA 10 minutes. Extraction team en route, but 20 minutes out. Secure and hold. Frank immediately shifted to tactical mode. We've got company. Hostiles inbound. Marla's expression changed from confusion to understanding. Montega's people. They must have traced the data transfer. How? This was a secure connection. Salvador has resources even in custody. Loyalists within agencies, monitoring systems. Marla moved with surprising speed for someone so ill, retrieving a go-bag from a closet. There's a snowmobile in the shed behind the chalet. Take Katie and go. Now. And leave you to what? Negotiate. To buy you time. Marla withdrew a pistol from the bag. A Beretta 9mm. I'm already dead, Frank. Cancer or cartel, the result's the same. But I can make this final act count. Frank studied his wife. This complex, flawed, dying woman who had caused so much damage yet now offered sacrifice. They'll make it painful if they take you alive. I'm aware. She checked the weapon with practiced efficiency. That's why they won't take me alive. Frank woke Katie, quickly explaining the situation as they prepared to evacuate. She insisted on a moment with her mother, a private goodbye that Frank allowed despite the urgency. When Katie emerged, tear-streaked but composed, they moved toward the rear exit while Marla positioned herself at the front of the chalet. Dad, Katie said as they reached the shed, she gave me this. She held out a small data drive. Said it contains everything the laptop does, plus personal messages for us. Insurance in case they destroy the original. Frank secured the drive, then prepared the snowmobile. As they mounted the vehicle, the sound of approaching engines carried through the mountain air. Hold tight, Frank instructed, starting the engine. Before they could depart, automatic weapons fire erupted from the chalet's front. Marla had engaged the approaching threat. We can't leave her, Katie cried. She's made her choice, Frank replied, though the words cost him more than he expected. We honor it by surviving. They sped away as the firefight intensified behind them, navigating through moonlit forest trails toward the extraction point Tommy had designated. Twice they heard vehicles in pursuit. forcing detours through increasingly difficult terrain. At the extraction point, a small clearing suitable for helicopter landing, Frank established a defensive position while they waited. Katie remained silent, processing the night's events with remarkable composure despite the circumstances. "Do you think she meant it?" Katie finally asked. "The apology, the sacrifice?" Frank considered the question carefully. "Yes, I think at the end, she found a line she wouldn't cross. It doesn't erase what came before, but it matters anyway," Katie finished. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approached before Frank could respond. Within minutes, they were airborne, leaving the mountains and Marla's final stand behind. 3 days later, Frank and Katie stood at Arlington National Cemetery, watching as Salvador Montega and 3 high-ranking government officials were led away in handcuffs, arrested based on evidence from Marla's files. The corruption investigation was expanding by the hour, with more arrests expected. The chalet had been found burned to the ground, with 4 cartel operatives dead at the perimeter. Marla's remains were identified through dental records. According to forensic analysis, she had fought until her ammunition was exhausted, then triggered an explosion rather than be captured. Was she a hero or a villain in the end? Katie asked as they walked among the rows of white markers honoring fallen service members. Frank's answer was measured. Neither. She was human, capable of terrible betrayal and, ultimately, a single act of courage. We remember both. They stopped at a section where 7 markers stood in formation, the men lost in operations compromised by leaked intelligence. Frank placed a hand on one of the stones. "What happens now?" Katie asked. "Justice continues. The evidence your mother provided will dismantle networks that have operated with impunity for years. The families affected will receive restitution. And we," he turned to Katie, "we build something new." As they walked back toward the cemetery gates, Frank noticed a figure watching from a distance. Tommy, respectfully giving them space, but maintaining his promise of protection. Friends, allies, family. These were the foundations that would sustain them going forward. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed them had also forged something stronger, an unbreakable bond between father and daughter, tempered by fire and truth. Whatever shadows still lurked, whatever ghosts still haunted them, they would face together, standing in the light. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.